when it comes down to our minds, we are in control of that. And I don't think that it's been expressed enough in the African American community, and the trauma and the stress that we have gone through, not only in this pandemic, but on an everyday life for centuries and decades. Like, it begins to really impact us to a certain extent where we can't seem to get over that hump.
Right.
So I think that it definitely needs to be talked about. I read somewhere where they say between the ages of 13 and 17, or when a lot of our youth are having problems being able to absorb what's going on in the daily life. And then you have all different types of clinical titles put on things like depression and bipolar and you know, all the clinical names that they put to it, when really we've been living this life since our ancestors, and it's just passed down throughout generation. And unless someone decides to break that family cycle, it's going to keep going. It's going to keep going. And then you're going to put it on your children. Your children are going to put it on their children, and so forth and so on. And I think at a certain point, we begin to think that it's just a way of life.
Right. Indeed.
That's not it.
Right. I wanted to ask you some questions, but this just for the listeners, so we can kind of get on the same page in regards to we using the term trauma and depression. And I had looked up, you know, to see how it's been defined by some. And depression, when we talk about the depression that we're talking about today, in trauma as well, we're not talking about it, at least trauma, we're not talking about trauma necessarily like on a physical level, like where you've been injured, because that's one level, that's one type of trauma, right? We're talking about the psychological or what they say clinical trauma, right? And then in depression, we're not just talking about a depression that you feel temporarily when, let's say, you've lost a loved one. You know, we're not talking about that type of depression. What we're talking about is something a bit more severe. And so under one definition they have here for clinical depression, a mental health disorder characterized by persistently depressed mood or loss of interest in activities, causes significant impairment in daily life. You know, and it's in another explanation, they were saying that it's a more severe form of depression, also known as major depression or major depression disorder. And they say it isn't the same, of course, which I had to say, it isn't the same as depressed caused by loss. And going into the trauma aspect of it, it's a psychological trauma. It's damage to the mind that occurs as a result of a distressing event. You know, trauma is often the result of an overwhelming amount of stress that exceeds one's ability to cope or integrate the emotions involved with that experience. And you know, just to kind of like touch on that real lightly, real quick. You know, they talk about
post-traumatic stress. Yeah,
disorder like associated to individuals coming home from the military, right? You remember when they first started talking about that? And when I first heard that, I was like, oh, well, hell, we should have been diagnosed in the hood. You know,
right.
that was my immediate reaction. I say, and here's one thing: when you look at, I guess you could say the white social media or white world or whatever. Whenever a white individual will do something, they always try to look at it from some psychological point. You know, how they may have suffered this, that, and other in the family. And, you know, when they have kids that go into school and shoot up school, they always look at that from a psychological position. But whenever something go on with us, there's no psychology involved in it. It's just, that's them. It's, you know, it's drugs and this, that, and another, right? When I was psychological, but when I think about trauma myself and how it is associated and related to everything that we pretty much do today, I say that we're all suffering from some degree and some level of trauma, because trauma can be experienced by either either it can be experienced by coming through somebody, like a person telling you about something that happened to them in an event. An individual can be traumatized by something that happened to somebody else and they just told you about it. You ain't even see it. Trauma can be can happen by you witnessing something, and then trauma can happen to you by you personally going through it, right? And again, you just think about all the stuff we done seen, heard, and experienced. and you know, just in the urban communities by itself. You know, all the violence we see on a daily basis. You know what I'm saying? And they expect for this young little black girl and little black boy to be like the little white boy and little white girl and anybody else. You know?
Right.
And the thing is that when you think about, this is one of the things I always say, and I'm gonna get to, I want to ask you something. One thing I always say about us that really like bothers me a lot, and I guess I'm sure it does because I'm not like this no more. But it's the emotional piece that I see exercised out a lot of times or exhibited in the black community with each other, as well as when we're dealing with the perceived enemy, whoever it may be, right? Mm-hmm. How emotional we get and how that plays against us. And it's been going on for decades.
Right.
And like, when you're dealing with, let's just say with a racist, right? Them really knowing how emotional we can get, they'll say something that'll trip us, make them hit them upside the head, this, that, or another, right? And then they got something to, he done this to me, or she done that to me, right? They got something to use against them. When it's a mind game, you know, how they say, it's just a chestnut checker. Living in battle and war is a very mental game. You know, it's a thinking game. And understanding, though, with that, I believe that if most of us accept it, realize, and then started working against the traumas that we experience, understanding that the reason why we deal with life to me is people, places, and things, circumstances, right? The reason why we deal with life the way we do has a lot to do with, we say, our upbringing, right? But not just the good parts of it, but more so the bad parts of it.
Right.
Because that's what we remember the most, right?
Right.
The stuff that hurts.
Right.
You know? And so we begin to deal with people and things from a position of defense because we don't want certain things to happen.
Right. The trauma and the stress that I was exposed to, I bottled it up and I wrote it down. And that itself made me a novelist. It introduced me into writing my feelings down because I had to put that stuff somewhere. A lot of times in the black communities, we don't go to counselors. We don't go to therapists and things like that because it's not talked about or expressed in those manners. So I would take everything that was stressful that I saw or someone else, one of my friends was going through. I watched a lot of my friends being buried. I watched a lot of my friends go to prison all the way from middle school. I mean, it was one of those situations where a lot of them didn't have parents to tell them or show them love, to tell them, you know, we can't go outside past the street light. We can't be in certain areas or certain environments because it wasn't good for us or because they feared for our lives, literally. So it was an old saying that people say, you know, you are a product of your environment, but I refuse to believe that. I refuse to believe that.
Indeed.
I definitely should have been a product of my environment from where I came from going into adult entertainment, from going into survival, into the street life. I definitely should have been somewhere totally different from where I am now. But I decided to take that drama, put it on paper. I'm still a very big advocate of writing. And as I get ready to put out new novels and new expressions, and as I ghostwrite for other people, I get to learn more every single day about myself and what's going to help me on this journey every single day. So I went from so much writing to meditating and alignment, getting in my own head and getting out of my own personal way. Sometimes we are in our own way, so we can't see past the trauma that we have gone through. So it doesn't allow us to grow within ourselves. And I think that that's very important. And the growth that I have had over the last couple of years is what has allowed me to be introduced into meditation, be introduced into alignment. So now those are the things that I use to get away from the stress. Another thing is I get away from negativity. I do a lot of vibrational frequency. And if I'm in a, you know, as a child, you don't have those say-sos of, you know, I don't want to be here, I don't want to be there. You just have to go along with what the other adults are doing. But as an adult and a mother myself, I don't allow myself to be in negative spaces. And if I find myself in a negative space, I sit down and I get quiet and I listen. I talk to God and I see what it is that he's trying to tell me. A lot of times we can't hear because we're still too busy moving. The things around us are still too loud. So it won't allow us to hear. Then I had to heal. Healing is a very big part of letting go traumatic stress. So I definitely had to heal. And today I'm still learning beautiful things about myself every single day.
Because a lot of times when we're going through something, we feel like we're the only one going through it, you know?
Yeah.
Like we're the only one going through the challenging time that we're going through. And we get so, you know, depressed. We beat ourselves up so much, you know, and we get the why me and all that, right? And we don't sometimes realize that everybody going through something. You know, I hear this saying when I was younger that if everybody threw their problems on the table, you'll snatch yours back in a heartbeat. You know, because a lot of times we think we're going through some things, but whatever we're going through, we might not want to go through what that next person going through. You know what I'm saying? So is there anything like what you say, like specifically that you would like to share that was one of those moments that was very challenging for you that, you know, took a lot to get past and the technique that you explained to us is what you use to get beyond that point?
Oh, wow. Woo. Okay, yeah. I mean, emotional and mental abuse, I think a lot of women are afraid to talk about. They do not like to face the fact that they are in emotional and psychological abusive type of environments or relationships. And going through a 15-year time span of emotional instability really had me at a place where I did not like the woman that I was becoming. And to be paralyzed, to go to sleep walking and to wake up physically paralyzed, it definitely puts your mental aspect in a very different place that at that time I could not see how to dig my way out of it. I didn't want to lean that stress off on my family because it was like I'm the one that takes care of everyone. So what do you do when the person that holds the glue together needs some help? So I was definitely at a point in my life where I had no idea what to do. I had no idea who to talk to. I had no idea where to go and how to actually change the things around for me. But here I was still in an emotional and psychological abusive box. So I was still stuck. It was like being in quicksand. Every time you try to dig yourself back out of a situation, you get sucked right back in. Now that was something that took some growing. It definitely took some growing for me to do. I felt like I had to be the person that everyone else wanted me to be while I'm dealing with all of this that was going on in the inside. So I was like a bottle that somebody kept tightening the top on it. So that pressure ended up building up inside. And I woke up and I said, you know what? Enough is enough. Everybody was not going to like the decision that I was about to make, but I did it for me. I didn't even do it solely for my children. Because if I don't do something for me and about the emotional instability that I'm in, I can't help my children. So at that time, I made a decision to take a burden off of me that was so very heavy, so very toxic. So once I made those decisions and once I made those steps to basically take that snake from around my neck, so to speak, I felt free as a bird. You know, they tell you that you can't fly with one wing, and boy, is that true. That is very true. I kept trying to get out of what I was in, but I didn't realize that I was trying to do something physical. I was trying to do it physical, and it was going to take some mental stability to get out of an unstable situation. So I had to make up my mind first and foremost. It had nothing to do with my paralysis at the time because I'm here in this chair, but I still got everything else that I had before. I'm just not able to walk. So once I got over the pressure that I was putting on myself, whoo, man, it was a hell of a way to breathe.
Right.
So I had to lose some people. I had to lose some things. I had to get away from some things in order to find me. And once I found me, there was no turning back. So I had to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. I was very uncomfortable with people in my space. I was very uncomfortable doing things like what I'm doing right now. So I'm very proud of the growth of where I've become. I never would have did this 5 years ago. I probably wouldn't have did this 3 years ago. So the growth and the mentality that it took for me to get where I am, definitely I had to dig deep inside. And that's when meditation and alignment and vibrational frequency, the spirituality of the thing, came into my life. And once you get spiritual aligned with yourself, oh, you're going to be all right. Like I say, it's a lot of things that women do not want to talk about. But mental abuse and emotional abuse is just as traumatizing as physical abuse. Because see, those bruises, they go away. Now, I never had to deal with physical abuse, but that emotional and that psychological part of that will tear you down. Literally, man, woman, child, it will tear you down and it will destroy you from the inside out. Not liking the person that was looking back at me in the mirror.
Hey, continue talking. Let me grab the charger, but continue talking though.
Okay. So the person that, like I was saying, that was looking back at me in the mirror, I was unhappy with. I was unhappy with the people that were surrounding me. If you don't love yourself, you can't expect for no one else to love you, nor can you share that love abundantly amongst other people. So the first thing I had to do was get out of my own way and realize who I was. And if that's something that I wanted to tolerate. Emotional and psychological abuse is no different from physical abuse at all. It is no different. To get over that trauma, you're gonna have to dig. You're gonna have to dig and dig and dig and dig and dig. You're gonna have to cry about it. You know, there was a lot of days where I silently cried to myself, what am I supposed to do with this? How do I work my way out of it? I was mentally in a place. I was in that quicksand mentally, literally. And most people would have thought it was about being, you know, in a wheelchair. No, that was not it. I had gotten over that part already. It was the mental and psychological abuse that was still surrounding me. So once I got out of that situation and allowed myself to start healing, things started to get better for me. I had to learn to love and satisfy me from the inside out.
Right.
A lot of people was asking me, you know, how did I feel about being in a wheelchair? And people had no idea. They would see me, I would be smiling, and, you know, they would say, wow, you brighten up my day. And I'm always thankful to brighten up the next person's day. But what I was dealing with in the inside was something totally different. You know, when the doors close, you can't hide no more. You're in that space alone. So that's where I were. And what I did was I decided to make Kiana happy. I decided to put me first. So that allowed me to disarm myself from unwanted stress.